Hi guys! So today we are going to be reading part 3 of The Fall of the House of Usher. The story was split into 3 parts, so this is our final part to the story. In part 2, we got some very bad news about Lady Madeline. She finally succumbs to her illness and she died, and our unnamed narrator and Roderick Usher took her and placed her body in kind of a vault. It's kind of underneath the house. Very spooky, very dark room with a heavy iron door. Let's see what happens to our narrator and Roderick now. I was visiting an old friend of mine, Roderick Usher, in his old stone house, his palace, where a feeling of death hung on the air. I saw how fear was pressing on his heart and mind. Now his only sister, the Lady Madeline, had died, and we had put her body in its resting place, in a room inside the cold walls of the palace. A damp, dark vault, a fearful place. As we looked down upon her face, I saw that there was a strong likeness between the two. Indeed, said Usher, we were born on the same day, and the tie between us has always been strong. We did not long look down at her, for fear and wonder filled our hearts. There was still a little color in her face, and there seemed to be a smile on her lips. We closed the heavy iron door and returned to the rooms above, which were hardly less gloomy than the vault. And now a change came into the sickness in my friend's mind. He went from room to room with a hurried step. His face was, if possible, whiter and more ghastly than before, and the light in his eyes had gone. The trembling in his voice seemed to show the greatest fear. At times he sat, looking at nothing for hours, as if listening to some sound I could not hear. I felt his condition, slowly but certainly gaining power over me. I felt that his wild ideas were becoming fixed in my own mind. As I was going to bed late in the night of the 7th or 8th day after we'd placed Lady Madeline within the vault, I experienced the full power of such feelings. Sleep did not come. While the hours passed, my mind fought against the nervousness. I tried to believe that much, if not all, of what I felt was due to the gloomy room, to the dark wall coverings, which, in a rising wind, moved on the walls. My efforts were useless. A trembling I could not stop filled my body, and fear without reason caught my heart. I sat up, looking into the darkness of my room, listening. I do not know why. To certain low sounds which came from the storm was quiet. A feeling of horror lay upon me like a heavy weight. I put on my clothes and began walking nervously around the room. I had been walking for a very short time when I heard a light step coming towards my door. I knew it was Usher. In a moment, I saw him at my door, as usual, very white, but there was a wild laugh in his eyes. Even so, I was glad to have his company. And have you not seen it? He said. He hurried to one of the windows and opened it to the storm. The force of the entering wind nearly lifted us from our feet. It was, indeed, a stormy but beautiful night, and wildly strange. The heavy, low-hanging clouds, which seemed to press down upon the house, flew from all directions against each other, always returning and never passing away in the distance. With their great thickness, they cut off the light from the moon and the stars. But we could see them because they were lighted from below by the air itself, which we could see rising from the dark lake and from the stones of the house itself. You must not, you shall not look out at this, I said to Usher, as I led him from the window to a seat. This appearance which surprised you so has been seen in other places too. Perhaps the lake is the cause. Let us close this window. The air is cold. Here is one of the stories you like best. I will read, and you shall listen, and thus we will live through this fearful night together. The old book, which I had picked up, was one written by a fool for fools to read. And it was not, in truth, one that Usher liked. It was, however, the only one within easy reach. He seemed to listen quietly. Then I came to a part of the story in which a man, a strong man full of wine, began to break down a door, and the sound of the dry wood as it breaks can be heard all throughout the forest around him. Here I stopped, for it seemed to me that from some very distant part of the house, sounds came to my ears like those of which I had been reading. It must have been the likeness that made me notice them, for the sounds themselves, with the storm still increasing, were nothing to stop or interest me. I continued the story, and I read how the man, now entering the broken door, discovered a strange and terrible animal of the kind so often found in these old stories. He strikes it, and it falls, with such a cry that he has to close his ears with his hands. Here again, I stopped. There could be no doubt. This time, I did hear a distant sound, very much like the cry of the animal in the story. I tried to control myself so that my friend would see nothing of what I felt. I was not certain that he had heard the sound, although he had clearly changed in some way. He had slowly moved his chair so that I could not see him well. I did see that his lips were moving as if he was speaking to himself. His head had dropped forward, but I knew he was not asleep, for his eyes were open, and he was moving his body from side to side. I began reading again, and quickly came to a part of the story where a piece of heavy iron falls on a stone floor with a ringing sound. These words were just past my lips when I heard clearly, but from very far away, a loud, ringing sound, as if something of iron had indeed fallen heavy upon the stone floor, or as if an iron door had closed. I lost control of myself completely and jumped up from my chair. Usher still sat, moving a little from side to side. His eyes were turned to the floor. I rushed to his chair. As I placed my hand on his shoulder, I felt that his whole body was trembling. A sickly smile touched his lips. He spoke in a low, quick, and nervous voice, as if he did not know I was there. Yes, he said, I heard it. Many minutes, many hours, many days have I heard it, but I did not dare to speak. You have put her living in the vault. Did I not say that my senses were too strong? I heard her first movements many days ago, yet I did not dare to speak. And now that story, but the sounds were hers. Oh, where do I run? She's coming to ask why did I put her there too soon? I heard her footsteps on the stairs. I heard the heavy beating of her heart. Here, he jumped up and cried as if he were giving up his soul. I tell you now, she stands at the door. The great door to which he was pointing now slowly opened. It was the work of the rushing wind, perhaps. But no, outside that door a shape did stand, a tall figure in its grave clothes of the Lady Madeline of Usher. There was blood upon her white dress, and the signs of her terrible efforts to escape were upon every part of her thin form. For a moment she remained trembling at the door. Then, with a low cry, she fell heavily upon her brother in the rain. As she died at last, she carried him down with her, down to the floor. He too was dead, killed by his own fear. I rushed from the room. I rushed from the house. I ran. The storm was around me in all its strength as I crossed the bridge. Suddenly, a wild light moved along the ground at my feet, and I turned to see where it was coming from. For only the great house and its darkness were behind me. The light was that of the full moon, a blood-red moon, which was now shining through that breaking front in the wall, that crack which I thought I had seen when I first saw that place. Then only a little crack, which now widened as I watched. A strong wind came rushing over me. The whole face of the moon appeared, and I saw the great wall falling apart. There was a long and stormy shouting sound, and the deep black lake closed darkly all around what remains of the house of Usher. Okay, so a very spooky end to our story. Lady Madeline was not dead in that vault. She was alive and calling out for somebody to come and save her. And her brother heard and did not come. And then they both died. And like the connection that everyone made between the house and the family, as the family died, so did the house. Okay. So as we finish the story, if you guys have any questions for me about the fall of the House of Usher, definitely reach out, send me an email, join my Google Meet, do whatever you need to do. All right. Have a nice day, guys.